Welcome to the Women Who Glorify podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine Grace, and I strive to center every discussion with authenticity rooted on biblical truth for young adult Christian women. My hope is that you will see how you can glorify God in your current season through your career, relationships, and serving in your community. Together, let's put down the lie that someone else's life is better than ours and that our current season isn't good enough. Instead, let's seek and lean on God, trusting His timing is good and acknowledging He knows we need our current season to prepare us for our future seasons. Come be encouraged on how to be a woman who glorifies God as I gather with my friends and they share a glimpse into their lives as women who glorify God. Welcome, everyone, to the first official episode of the Women Who Glorify podcast, and I'm really excited that you're back. Or if you missed out on our trailer, go back and listen to that as it has so many details for you that are going to be helpful as you join us on Women Who Glorify podcast. Today, I am very excited to announce that I have one of my closest friends, Lorissa, joining us on the podcast. She has a lot of great insight to share, such as serving others through hard work and being joyful in singleness. As you listen to the podcast today, you will be able to get the most out of today's episode and all the episodes moving forward by being able to fill out our refinement journals to cultivate personal refinement in your own life. You can access the journals by joining our Patreon community, which will be linked in the show notes. And now I'm really excited to be bringing on Lorissa to the Women Who Glorify podcast.
Hello. How's it
Good.
going?
Welcome
Good.
to the Women Who Glorify podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Yes, very exciting.
It's first of all very fitting that you're the first guest. This podcast, honestly, one of the main things that inspired it was our deep conversations in college when we were roommates and how we awe with God and we'd marvel and tell stories and like different curiosities we'd have, and we just go and go and go. And then we did that kind of often. But since college, I've really witnessed how God's just transformed your life with post-grad, college, how He moved you across the country from Minnesota to Oregon, just through work, just constantly providing you work in like many different ways, but then also just how God's up in every detail of your life. And I think you just radiate that so well. I just think having you on is the perfect fit, like I said, and it's just a huge inspiration of the podcast. Clearly our conversation, but also just the way you live your life and how you bring glory to God in all of it. So I was like, who better than Lorissa to start this off? Our audience listening in. So Lorissa was my college roommate, one of my closest friends to this day, and also was one of my bridesmaids at my wedding. She radiates joy wherever she is. She's an encourager, a truth teller, smart and fun, an absolute blast to spend time with, and she's very competitive to play games with.
I'm a big game player.
Yeah, you are, at all costs. But for work, she is a refuge coordinator and a session instructor in Oregon, and currently living life to the fullest as a single gal. And recently, she's been just doing a ton of adventures across the mountains with her new dog, Shy.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you have so much. So how about you start with telling us about your job and your career?
Yeah, like you said, my job title officially is refuge coordinator and session instructor at a ministry called Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch. And God led me out to Oregon because I'm from Minnesota, like Jasmine said. I lived in Minneapolis for a while, going there for college, but grew up just in a suburb outside the Twin Cities. And then God opened the door for me to come out here to Crystal Peaks. And so this ranch, it started in 1995, and it rescues horses who have been abused and neglected. And then we work with kids from the community, and they come out for what we call sessions. So it's an hour and a half with one kid, one session leader, and usually a horse. And this ranch started kind of out of the need for horses that were starving or abused, and so they just need a lot of care and a lot of love. Troy and Kim started this ranch, and so Troy led a youth group, and so lots of kids from the youth group wanted to start coming out, kids who were in the juvenile detention center, and really from any background, foster kids, they would come out and help the horses get better and to heal. And so Kim and Troy started to see how the horses were starting to heal on the outside, like a lot of these kids are starting to heal on the inside through a connection with a horse. But
Mm.
ultimately, because when you connect with a horse, it points to Jesus. Often our relationship with a horse very much reflects our relationship with God, and God teaches so many lessons through horsemanship. What I do is I work with the kids. I spend an hour and a half with a kid. I have about 2 to 3 sessions a day. So I'll see to 2 to 3 different kids a day. And we just spend time usually with the horses and just sharing the love of Jesus with them and encouraging them, becoming their friend and mentor. If they're not in love, like they don't have to do horse stuff, because some of the kids that come out either might be afraid of horses or they just horses aren't their thing. And so we have a wood shop, so we build stuff. We do stuff in the greenhouse, because right now we have an exploding produce coming out of our greenhouse. So we have like
Oh.
zucchinis and figs and peaches. We have an orchard. We have so many trees in the orchard. It has been a long journey of getting that orchard into what it is now, because 6 years ago, when God told Kim, who started this ranch, to put an orchard out in this specific area, it used to be a dump. And so God was like, this is where I want my orchard. And so we put the orchard out there, and so many things have tried to attack it, like porcupines and diseases and not enough water. Because in Oregon, it's a desert, so we don't get rain hardly ever. We actually got rain last night, which was super cool to hear on the roof. So that's something I really miss about Minnesota, is like
Oh.
you can never hear rain on the roof. I mean, you do, but on very, like, it's rare. It's like a surprise when it happens. Anyway, so yeah, so that orchard is doing so well. So we can take the kids out there and we can pick fruit, or we can pick carrots, where our carrots are exploding and going crazy too. So there's so many different things that you can do with a kid, and it's not about what you do, but it's just the time that's spent with them and becoming their friend and mentor, and just sharing the love of Jesus with them, praying with them. So that's the main thing of what I do. There's so many different aspects of Crystal Peaks, but basically the overall theme is it's a ministry, and we use horses with kids. And the difference kind of between, you might hear a lot of places that are horse therapy places, which are awesome too, because they kind of use counseling, and the people are more trained specifically in psychology and counseling. And we just believe that Jesus is the only one who can fix a broken heart. A horse can't fix what's empty inside of you. They're a great tool to help, like, especially autistic kids or kids with disabilities, sensory processing disorders. When they connect with a horse, it's really beneficial to them. But ultimately, we want to be pointing kids towards Jesus, not towards a horse. And so we just emphasize Jesus is going to be the one to heal your broken heart, not a horse. And so we love to use those horses for ways to develop a good bond and friendship with them, but also that they're pointing to their maker, who's God, and Jesus just has given them a super special understanding and awareness of humans and their emotions. And I could talk more about that, but I know we don't have a ton of time. But anyway, there's more, but
No, that's perfect. I think something you did mention earlier about horses specifically that I think people would be really curious to hear more about is, expanding on how horses do reflect our relationship with Jesus, because, God did create horses, he created all animals, but he's in the details, and he thinks ahead, and he makes connections to things and brings the full circle around. Do you want to explain that more with horses, how it reflects our relationship with Jesus?
First of all, there's so many different horsemanship styles of how you can train horses, how you can work with horses, but God is the ultimate horse trainer because he created them and he knows them best. And so at Crystal Peaks, we really look to the Bible first on how to work with horses, how to train horses, how God teaches us about horses through the Bible. The horse is mentioned at least 150 times in the Bible. I was just talking the other day with a kid about something that you find in the Bible. It's in James, and it's on the taming of the tongue, and how you can put a bridle on a horse, and a bridle, you put a bit in its mouth and it controls where the horse goes. You can pull on the bit one way and it'll go that way, and then pull on it and it'll go the other way. And so how that relates to, well, in the Bible, it specifically says in James, like, just like a bit controls a horse on which way to go, your tongue controls which way your life will go. And so to tame because what you speak over it basically is what James was saying, like speaking life or death, like
Yeah.
determine which course your life will take. And so pointing out like those type of lessons, but also we do something called join up. And so we take a horse and a round pen. A round pen is just, it's like it's literally a round pen. It's like a small circle that's just fencing all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way to replicate what a horse would experience in the wild. When a horse is joining up with a wild horse herd, we're going to replicate that, because a horse that wants to join a herd, like let's say there's a herd roaming in the wild, which there's some in Oregon. I don't know if there's any in Minnesota. I don't know. But in Oregon, there's several wild horse herds. And sometimes we go and see them from afar because they're wild. So they're just like wild animals. That's how you treat them when you're encountering, you wouldn't go up to the snuggle the black bear. So in wild, we can observe them. And so there's always a leader of a horse herd. And that leader is in charge of the mares from protection, but then also defending from any outsiders that can be agitating or disrupting, like the herd, I don't know, vibe, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. But anyway, so that horse that's asking to join up with and come in and join the herd, they're going to have to show signs of submission and that they're willing to respect the leader. And so that's lowering of the head, that's licking and chewing, ears pointed towards the leader. And so that horse in the wild is going to be circling this horse leader in the middle. And once that horse is showing signs and that horse leader senses that respect, then they will invite the horse in by backing up. And so we replicate that in the round pen. And so we, as the leaders and the kid, will both be standing in the middle, and this horse is circling us on the outside of the ring, and we're watching for signs of respect and by submission. And they're going to be licking and chewing and pointing their ears towards us, lowering their head. Or if they are feeling like they want to be the leader and they're in charge, then they might throw some bucks or some kicks and have a high head and not be willing to join up with us. And that's totally okay. They can keep running as long as they want to, because that's work for them.
Yeah.
The horse that is moving the least, or the leader that is moving the least, is like the leader. So we're in the middle, we're not moving, we're just pivoting as we're following this horse as it's going with us. And so anyway, so that translates a lot with our walk with God, because depending on what the horse does in the round pen, there's so many teachable moments as far as how I can be with God sometimes, because sometimes the horse, what we're looking for, is ready to connect, is ready to come to us, and that's the blessed place for them to be. So me with God, if I'm like ready to like cast all my there's the verse, cast all your burdens on Jesus because he cares for you. And we care for the horses, we love them. It's not like a boss, you're my slave. It's a like we have to be partners, and this is a friendship, but you have to trust me to be your leader. And that's the same with God. We have to trust him, and he's going to take care of us, but it takes that trust piece, and it can be hard sometimes to trust, and we want to do things on our own sometimes,
all the time.
So, yeah. And that's the same with the horses. Sometimes they want to, like, they think they know what's best. And so there's just so many lessons specifically in the round pen that I love doing, that God has shown me so many things.
Well, like you said too, the horse that wants to not submit and thinks that they're in charge, kind of like we as people think we have it all together, they have to keep working. They have to keep going around and around a circle. And like you said, it's more work for them. You're like, that's fine, you can keep doing that. But it's just like us, right? Like God can keep us on a season we don't want to be in, or God can keep us in a situation that we want to leave. We're trying to be our own boss. We're trying to keep our own control. We think we are in contrul. So I see the total reflection into our own lives of like, God's just going to let us think what we want to think, but he would with the horses. But at the same time, you're just going in a circle. There's really not like an end to that until you want to submit. And that's something that God does a lot to us, to teach us. We need to trust him ultimately. We could talk forever about your job. But just some other things too, I think that's really unique is you have a bunch of side jobs that you do. But I
Mhm.
think uniquely what's really neat is that God's provided work for you, but really it's a way to help and serve people in your community, which
Mhm.
I think is amazing. And then also it's been a blessing financially for you here and there, right? Through different seasons.
Mhm.
You want to talk about that a little bit too?
Yeah. So my work at Crystal Peaks is they make it a shorter work week where we're
Mhm,
only working Monday through Thursday. We just do longer work days. And so I have 3-day weekends, and God's opened the door through different connections of neighbors and people who live nearby that just need help.
mhm,
And at first I did need the side jobs. Now it's less about that and more about the person. One of the side jobs I do, I help lady. She's actually the Deschutes County Commissioner for this area, and so she's super kind person. And I just love. I know she's busy, and so I love helping her out by scooping out her barn. And it's an older couple that need extra help around the house, and they don't know Jesus yet. So I've been like
mhm,
it's been a really cool opportunity to like become more courageous in my faith to like share Jesus and working towards like just say, like I always tell her I'm praying for her because they
mhm,
really struggle with their health. And so that's one of the biggest reasons I love helping them is because they are just not able to do a whole ton, and they have a whole ranch. And so just sharing the love of Jesus with them and praying for them. And then I also help another same situation, an older lady that she just needs extra help around the house. And I just really feel God pressing on me to share his love with them and be a support, even though, I'd rather maybe do some other things that are fun things on the weekend.
mhm.
But I know that this is what God wants me to do. And it's, yeah, a cool growth opportunity. So,
Yeah. Absolutely, because I love that you have your job, but then also God's provided other ways to help the community. But then also, like I said, it was an income opportunity for you at the time. But yeah, it's definitely grown into just how you serve the community and how you're involved with your neighborhood and people around you and older couples and people who have busy lives. And so I think that's really neat how God shows up and works in us to serve others, even when, yeah, we want to do our own things, which isn't bad. And of course, like, let's
mhm.
have our fun and go on adventures. But then also like just how God tied that all together, right? Because you're from Minnesota, he brought you all the way to Oregon to do that. And so I think that's incredible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's been a blessing and a growing experience. So,
Yeah. Well, we're also on the podcast I definitely want to talk about, which is that you have so much fun in your current season of singleness, because I can see clearly how you live your life to the absolute fullest. You do so much to have fun in this season. You don't, pity, you don't be down on yourself or be upset, but instead you do so many exciting things. And I think every time we have our regular talks, there's always something new and exciting that you're sharing of adventures.
mhm.
And so I'd love for you to share some exciting things that you've been able to do that you maybe wouldn't have been able to do if you were deep in dating or married.
Yeah, there's so much. There's a strong community of believers here at the ranch. Working at Crystal Peaks isn't just a job, it's like a calling. Definitely I wanted to be there and I desired to be there, but like did God specifically call me there? So everybody who's
Mhm,
here at Crystal Peaks is called to be here to minister to the kids and the families and the parents that come. And so because of that, we're all really strong believers that are learning how to do community really well. And so I have a lot of really close friends through that. And so we love to do adventures together because Oregon, it's kind of different from Minnesota, at least from like growing up in Minnesota. We would go to like the lake and hang out at the lake for the day, but there wasn't a whole ton of like hiking or like mountains or waterfalls. Like that's all in Oregon. So
mhm,
it's like the desert climate, but there's the mountains here. And then you go across the mountains, across the pass, and gets ton of rain over there. So you can get within just a couple hours, you can get so much diversity topography. And so there's tons of beautiful mountain hikes. There's tons of beautiful waterfall hikes. You can drive 3 hours to the ocean. I love going there. Anyway, there's so many different things to do. I love all of that outdoors stuff. And so we go hiking all the time. We go camping all the time. We just go on adventures where it's like, okay, like we know we want to go kind of in this area.
Mhm.
So I do a little bit of research, but we just throw everything in the back of a truck and we just drive around and we try to find a spot in the middle of nowhere where there nobody else is.
Yeah.
Because you can go to a campground, but then you have a bunch of neighbors right there, and
Mhm.
then there's screaming children running by or whatnot. So we love being in the middle of nowhere where there's nobody else and there's just the beautiful view. So we do that a lot. But then this is the first summer that I've actually gotten into backpacking. So that's been like super amazing, because that's where I feel the closest to God, is just in nature. It just reflects him so much and his beauty. And so, yeah, so that's what I've been able to do in singleness, is just enjoy God's creation and just pick up and like just travel a lot
Mm.
and go different places and visit friends and visit people. And I really love it because, yeah, I have the community who also wants to do that and also wants to go backpacking or whatnot. It's been really cool, and I love it so much.
You've started to do these adventures with your dog, Shy.
Yeah, my dog's Shy. I got her last October. I prayed about it for a really long time because I still love freedom to just go somewhere and not feel responsible for
Mhm.
a dog. Obviously changes some things where I can't just
Right.
go. But now I have a roommate. She's awesome. She watches Shy, because I can't always take Shy in every circumstance. But for the most part now, she loves to come camping. And she's 1 year old. I got her last October. She's a border collie and Australian shepherd mix. Both those breeds are smart, and then you combine them, and then she's super
Mhm.
smart. She picks up things super fast, and I've been training her all these fun little tricks. And I just actually the other night watched America's Got Talent, and on
Yeah.
it there was like an act that was a guy and his dog, and his dog was a border collie, and they were doing this whole fun performance. The dog was doing all these tricks and like spinning and doing all these fun things, and I saw it. I was like, that's gonna be me and Shy someday. We're gonna do that.
I love
So
that.
yeah, so it's really fun to have a dog. So
Yeah. When I saw
yeah,
you're out there in the woods and she's like jumping huge sticks.
they were fallen logs. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we were going to find some lakes in the mountains, and she just jumps, clears them. Like at one point though, she did trip over it, so that was funny. But I got the good video of her clearing the log.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. What would your advice be to someone who maybe is struggling their season of singleness to live like a fun life, right? To kind of get out of a low point.
Uh-huh. Well, I would say the biggest thing that since I moved out here, and even in college too, like having good friends who love Jesus and can have what I call deep talks. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
talk about things of the heart. So for me, like having people who are a listening ear and who are just really good friends that point me towards Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
and we do things together, we have fun adventures, feeling that deep connection with a friend often for me was super important, because when I felt like lonely, that was usually because I didn't have really close girlfriends. There's that, first of all, like having a
Yeah,
really close community, even older mentors, like having a mentor in your life, um,
absolutely.
been super important too. And so just finding community, I think, is the biggest thing, is
Mm-hmm.
when you're alone, then it can be really easy to just kind of spiral.
Well, and the enemy also, he wants us to be lonely. He wants us to struggle in that,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
have a pity party for ourselves and to be down and be depressed. And so obviously community brings truth and brings life, especially Christian community, right? They should be the light. God talks about that all over the Bible.
Just from that, I was thinking we often sing in songs or Jesus is all we need, which he totally is. That's the first thing with if you're struggling with singleness, is to go with him, because he cares and he understands and he wants to hear your heart, and you can pour out your heart to him and he fills you up. And so that's actually the first most important thing. But then from there,
Yes.
God created us for community. God saw that Adam was alone and he created Eve. And so
Mhm.
it's not, if we're going to friends, it's not like we're replacing Jesus with them. It's just a connection point that God created us for community. And we pray about what state we're in. Jesus, are you asking me to come to you and give this to you? Or am I going to people too much? Because that also can be sometimes something that I need to be praying about. Am I too often going to my friends when I should be going to Jesus? So praying about, there's a little bit of a balance there
Yeah.
for the need to go to Jesus when I'm, going to friends instead. That has been a huge blessing for me to feel emotionally fulfilled too, as well, to be understood and heard by another really close friend, just having those deep talks and fun adventures. So that's the biggest thing I think in singleness that has helped me remain super content. Thankfulness too, seeing how God has blessed me
Yeah.
so much. The life I'm living is not the life that I thought I would ever get because, well, I, first of all, like, we went to Bible college together. I got a missions degree and I
Mhm.
knew God had called me to missions. But right after college, God made it super clear that that was not what He was calling me to do immediately leaving college. I still have that on my heart. And I still believe that God will bring me in some type of missions place later in the future. I don't know when that could be. That could be in a year, or that could be in 10 years or 20 years. So I'm not worried at all about that. So that led to what I thought I was going to be doing was missions, but God led me to come out here to work on a ranch, which when I was a kid, when I was 8, I was obsessed with horses. That's all I wanted to do. But
Mhm.
then as I grew, I knew God was calling me to missions. So I was like, okay, I'm going to lay down this dream to work with horses, to have horses in order to do what God's asked me to do, which is ministry.
Yep.
And then God was like, whoa, 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 I didn't ask you to do that. Like, you can still use horses in ministry and for my glory. And you could still, like, I didn't ask you to lay that down. And I was like, oh, you didn't? Like, what? And so that's where it's super thankful, because I didn't expect that I would be able to have this dream of working with horses. And then God
Mhm.
totally, like, provided and showed a way that it could happen. And so, yeah, there's just so many things to be thankful for. And so instead of focusing on what I don't have but desire, which I do desire marriage, but there's so many things that God has given me that I can be thankful for and focus on instead of what I don't have. You
Yeah.
know, it's just a season. Like, I believe God gives us the desires of our hearts, and I could be married in 10 years or 20 years or in a year. So, like, I'm not
Absolutely.
worried about the timing, because God knows best. And I'd so much rather do it His way than being all anxious and frustrated for years and not enjoying where He has me
Yeah.
right now. He's been teaching me how to be in the moment and to not worry about tomorrow. You know, that's so easy to do, and I still do it. It's a process of growing and seeing
Mhm.
how I'm not where I was a year ago. He's growing me.
You mentioned so many gold nuggets with that. So if people are listening, I would rewind, listen to that again, and write everything down that she said, because you just said so much truth. Starting off with thankfulness, right? I mean, for me, when I was in my lower seasons of life, singleness or not, gratitude and being thankful is what got me out of it each time. What you said about instead of focusing almost on what God hasn't done yet, and like you said, it's a season, right? I think so many people forget that it's not what He hasn't done yet. So instead, let's think about and focus on all the gratitude and all that we have now, because we've talked about this whole episode is how much God has provided and brought you your dog, your community, all the work and the travel and your dreams of being with horses when we're a young kid and all the things. God does so
Yeah.
much. He's so active. He's so involved in all the details. And yet there could be that one thing that our heart desires, and it's a good thing to desire, but then it's just not yet. And God has something else happening that's so present
Mhm.
in the day to day. And God just so badly wants everyone to realize what they're living in their current season and the blessings God has. So I
Mhm.
brought that up. And two, you also said it's a process. I think it's so important too. If someone's feeling bad about singleness or feeling down about it, and then they think, okay, I'm going to be grateful today. And then the next day they get upset. It's like, nope, it's a process. You got to remind yourself.
Mhm.
Same thing for me. Same thing like you just said. You still think about tomorrow, but it's like, oh, we will trust God, and that's a process too. So we got to give ourselves the grace and gratitude to do that. And I like
Yeah.
too, you mentioned, yeah, your desire is marriage, and that could be in 10 years, 20 years, but it could be in a year. And
Mhm.
that's the same advice you gave me when I was single. Who knows, Jasmine, you could be married in a year, and it pretty much happened. It was like a year and a half
Yeah.
by. And
Yeah. You never
so
know.
that's truth too. And I think for me, that really helped. Your encouragement back then in my season really helped, because you encouraged me like, hey, don't be so upset about something that hasn't happened yet. Like, it could happen tomorrow. It could happen in a month, in a year. And just
Yeah.
keeping that hope alive, I think is really
Mhm.
important. Well, thank
Yeah.
you,
Sure.
Lorissa, so much for being on the podcast. Was there any last words that you wanted to say to the audience about anything you've talked about?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say God's word is so important. And so to be reading that every day, it totally,
Mhm.
if you want to see that transformation of over time and you look back in a year, how much you've changed. God's word is what changes you. And won't mean Jesus, it changes you. But through his word, that's the most clear, like the way that he speaks to us. He speaks to us in a variety of ways, but like that is a super important way. If you're reading that every day, it transforms you. And so to be reading his word every day, I would say is one of the best pieces of advice somebody has given me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being our first guest on the Women Who Glorify podcast.
It's been fun. Thanks for having me.
Have a great rest of your day.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Guess what, friends? This isn't where today's message ends. You can take this week's message even further by cultivating personal refinement in your current season of life as you seek to be a woman who glorifies God. I've created exclusive podcast content called the Refinement Journals for each episode, full of practical applications, self-reflection questions, digital wallpapers, and more, made just for you. To access, go to Women Who Glorify on Patreon by clicking the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining us today by listening to the Women Who Glorify podcast, where I strive to center every discussion with authenticity rooted on biblical truth for young adult Christian women. Join us next week by following Women Who Glorify on wherever you listen to podcasts. I hope you feel encouraged and equipped on how you're to be a woman who glorifies God in your current season of life. If you have a minute, please leave a review by sharing how you've been encouraged through this podcast so it can be found by more women who need biblical truth and be lifted up in their current season. Share this episode with your friends, family, and on social media by tagging @the Jasmine Grace and @Women Who Glorify. For deeper growth, community, and exclusive podcast content, join Women Who Glorify on Patreon. Click the link in the show notes. I'm Jasmine Grace, and I'm so grateful to have you join in to Women Who Glorify.